Students, today we come with a new topic that is on working class movement and trade unionism. We studied about industrial revolution and agrarian revolution, how far it changed the life prospects of the people, how the working class community were suffered under industrial revolution, how the environment that was polluted, and the origin of two classes following industrial revolution or as a result of industrial revolution. The pre-industrial society that was divided as masters and slaves, the medieval feudalism that created two classes, that is masters and slaves. But industrial revolution created two important classes, one that is capitalist and proletariats or workers. We know the capitalists were the owners of the means of production. Means of production that we means land, labor, and property. So they were the owners of the means of production, and the workers under the system, they were forced to work to their masters or the capitalist group, and they owned nothing but their labor power. They had to sell their labor to the factory owners for a price or wage. The laborers got a price or wage for their labor to the masters or the capitalists. All the means of production that was controlled by the capitalists, huge money that was earned by them, and there was mad rush among the capitalist group for getting more and more money, and the production that was only for markets, and the workers who suffered very much under the capitalist system. They were succumbed under the pressure of capitalism. So, how far the industrial revolution that seriously hit the prospects of the laborers? That was in the form of insanitary working condition. Almost all workers who were lived in a small cottage, especially in slums, and there prevailed the insanitary conditions, unhygienic drinking water, everything. The proliferation of the urban slums, long hours of work, low wages, exploitation of women and children, and unpropertied working class, growing unemployment, all that is the offshoot of industrial revolution. So the condition of the laborers was quite miserable under these conditions, and the early factories were built with little consideration for the health and comfort of the workers. Almost all factories were urban centered and were built on back to back principle. Back to back principle, that means one factory, a layer of factory, layers of factories, one factory followed by another, without proper space, without proper sanitation, and without proper security. So early factories were built with little consideration for health and comfort of the workers. Almost all factories had bad air, because you see that modern form of method or modern techniques or sophisticated methods to control the air pollution that was not prevailed. The smoke emitted by the chimneys that seriously affect the health condition of the workers. They were affected by the serious diseases like that of tuberculosis, plague, and similar diseases. Machines were huge and noisy, unfended and dangerous. Long hours of work and low wages were the most common grievances of the industrial workers. They had to work at least for 15 to 18 hours per day. Even the women and children were appointed in the factories and they have forced to work from 15 to 18 hours per day. There was no time for leisure. There was no proper schooling. There was no proper hospital facilities. No medical insurance system to the workers. The labor condition in the mines was even more deplorable than those in the factories. So, these extreme living conditions slowly gave rise to the class consciousness. Different workers who were engaged in different um, activities and different factories, this miserable working condition that gave rise to the class consciousness, rise of class consciousness, slowly they united together and showed their solidarity against the capitalist group. They emerged as a community and they developed a solidarity, class interest, and common political aims. They began to organize themselves and sought to realize the needs through union. Trade unions were first formed and they followed the method of collective agitation. Collective agitation and strike. At first, workers formed association with other workers in the same trade. First trade unions were formed in the same trade, and later, in connection with every trade unions were formed. These associations constituted the origin of trade unions. In England, severe measures, series of measures were taken by the government of Britain to curb the workers' unity and workers' solidarity. They feared that a French revolution that may be happened in Britain also. They feared of the bloodshed and French Revolution and they tried to curb the unity and solidarity of the workers. British Parliament passed series of acts in this regard. One that is the Combination Act of 1799 and 1800. The Combination Act of 1799 and 1800 that forbade the formation of trade union. And naturally, when the government control began to increase, resistance followed. We can see that wherever there is power and wherever there is control, that is followed by resistance. First resistance was through mass demonstrations, the famous Peterloo Massacre in 1819. Peterloo Massacre in 1819 that deserves special importance. That was the first mass demonstration against the atrocities committed by the state of Britain. That was a prototype of the modern working class demonstration. In August 1819, a mass meeting of 80,000 workers held at St. Peter's Field in Manchester was dispersed by the troops, killing hundreds and hundreds of workers. So a mass agitation engaged by 80,000 people moved against the state, and when they reached St. Peter's Field in Manchester, most of the workers were dispersed by the police. That resulted in the killing of the hundreds. So in this way, the Peterloo Massacre of 1819 that deserves special importance in the glory, glorious history of the working class movement. We can identify different type of trade unions: craft trade union, industrial trade union, and revolutionary trade union. The craft trade union was organization of the skilled workers. This trade union provided medical insurance and educational benefits to their members. The industrial union was militant in nature, more militant than that of the craft trade union, and regarded strike as a weapon to be used against the factory owners. And the socialist ideas that gathered momentum at that time: Saint Simon, Charles Fourier, Robert Owen, and their ideologies that extended much inspiration to the trade unions of Britain and Europe. The idea of socialism, developed by Karl Marx and Engels, that offers much inspiration to the traders. The first important figure in the history of the trade union was the early socialist Robert Owen. He made an effort to unite the various trade unions of England, and first trade union of England named Grand National Consolidated Trade Union (GNCTU). Under the leadership of Robert Owen, the first trade union of Britain was formed, that is known as Grand National Consolidated Trade Union. The modern working class movement against the industrial capitalism. Again, another notable movement was that of Luddite uprisings of 1808 to 1820. What Luddites done? Luddites were named after Ned Luddite, their leader. Breaking of machines, that was the main propaganda followed by the Luddites. Making of machines. They hated machines because they believed that the machines created misery. So that is why machines were crushed, that were destroyed, that were damaged every part of Britain, and that served as much headache to the authorities and the factory owners. Luddites thought that machines were the cause of their misery. The movement was so powerful in England that government had to use an army of 12,000 men to put it down. The movement was crushed with a great deal of bloodshed. Some of the other examples of the trade union movements, that was the railway strike in Pennsylvania, that was in 1877, the strike of Chicago workers in 1886, and Pullman strike were some of the heroic struggles launched by the workers of America. And students, now we have to make a brief reference on the Tardis movements. These even have some connection with the trade union movements. Tardis movement was started as a working class movement for the redress of the grievances of the workers and laborers. It provided an important push to the early socialist movements. The Reform Act of 1832. We make a detailed study of the Reform Act of 1832. This act was in concern with the to solve some of the anomalies and abuses concerned with the parliamentary system of Britain, and some of the legislations were made in connection with the working of factories. But the Reform Act of 1832, that afforded much disappointment to the working class of Britain. It enfranchised the middle class. By the Reform Act of 1832, voting right was given to the capitalist group or the landowners, and it enfranchised the middle class. The working class regarded political power as the panacea for their ills. So they identified that in order to get freedom, or in order to get rights, political power is very essential. It was the English Chartists who in 1830s and 1840s created first mass working class movement to give expression to socialist ideas of democracy, equality, and collectivism. In England, People's Charter was drawn up under the guidance of William Lovett and Ferguson O'Connor. A memorandum, a proclamation or memorandum that was prepared, that is popularly known as People's Charter, was prepared under the leadership of William Lovett and Ferguson O'Connor not to submit to the states. The demands were famous 6 points. Based on 6 points, the memorandum was based on 6 points: universal male suffrage, annual general elections, equal electoral districts, secret ballots, removal of property qualification for members of parliament, and payment of the members of lower house. We already mentioned that the workers realized that power that is the panacea for all problems they suffered. That is why they want to get the political rights, and the agenda that was focused with the political things: universal male suffrage, annual general elections, equal electoral districts, secret ballots, removal of property qualification, something. The widely read newspaper North Star was the popularizing Chartist ideas. The mouth organ of the Chartist movement was North Star, the newspaper. There were both moderate and extremists among the Chartists. One used the practice of agitation was to submit petition to the parliament. In 1848, Europe witnessed series of revolt in all parts, and that gave much impetus to the Chartists. Ferguson O'Connor was a popular leader who earns mass support. A gigantic petition was drawn up, and it was said to be signed by more than 5 million people. The plan was to present the petition to the Parliament. When the Chartist procession reached Westminster Bridge, they were moving towards the Parliament to submit their petition, but that moment their procession was stopped by the military at Westminster Bridge in Britain. Actually, there were only less than 2 million signatures in the petition. When it was scrutinized, a good number of signatures were found factious. All the charters fell into desperation and gradually died. So, this fallacy on the part of the Chartists that led to its decline. And the movement, though it was a failed venture, the movement influenced the rule, and all demands except the annual parliaments were granted in course. So, students, we make a study on the formation of the working class movement in Britain and Europe, and we make a small reference about the Chartist movements. Thank you.